It's an election unlike any other in American history. Vice President Kamala Harris wants to be the first female president, while her opponent, former President Donald Trump, is hoping for an elusive second term in office, despite being a convicted felon. Good evening and welcome to GHS TV's live coverage of Election Night 2024. I'm Calvin Nicholson, and tonight is guaranteed to leave us all on the edge of our seats as the results roll in. It's not just the presidential race we'll be keeping an eye on, but as usual, we'll be following the Senate race, where the Democrats hope to keep their razor-thin majority despite an unfavorable map. That includes a Tennessee U.S. Senate race between incumbent Republican Marsha Blackburn and Democratic challenger State Representative Gloria Johnson, who burst onto the scenes as one of the Tennessee Three. In the House, the Republicans want to stay in majority and increase their numbers with many Trump-backed candidates. And then we will turn to local politics as Memphis voters decide to approve the 3 gun control amendments. But first, the race everyone is talking about, the election of the next president of the United States. It's been a wild ride since July 21st, when President Joe Biden announced he was stepping down from the race, and the next day, Vice President Kamala Harris was at the top of the ticket. What was once thought as an easy victory for former President Donald Trump now was a tight race. Harris has made up in nearly ground in every state that Biden had fallen behind in. The polls in all swing states are within margin of error, meaning it's anyone's race. In the last month of the election, the economy has been at front and center as new jobs reportedly show a healthy economy. But a major strike by port workers also threatened $1 billion of imported goods. Republicans seized on the issue, blaming Harris. Reproductive rights are also a top election issue this year. Many states, including Florida, have constitutional amendments on the ballot enshrining reproductive rights in the state's constitution. Democrats have been running on the issue, and both Harris and Trump believe their vision for the United States will bring the people out to the polls. So let's get to some results. We're starting in our own state, the volunteer state, Tennessee. News source CNN is reporting that Trump is the projected winner, with 21% of the total votes counted. Harris has 23% of the votes, while former President Donald Trump has 77% of the votes. We're moving to the Sunflower State, Kansas. News source CNN is reporting with no projected winner at this current time. With only 8% of the total votes counted, Harris has 48% of the votes, while Trump has 50% of the votes. I will have more results for you in about 10 minutes. Now let's turn to the U.S. House, where Republicans are trying to keep control by 3 majority votes. However, all polls indicate the Democrats who lost the House in the 2022 midterms will most likely flip the seats needed to take the House. Here with the preview of what we can expect is U.S. House anchor Tyler Curry. Tyler?
Thanks, Calvin. Democrats are hoping for a blue wave this November. While Republicans have the majority right now, there's a tough battle for power ahead. The goal of the Democrats is to gain control of the House by flipping 6 or more seats. Republicans are trying to keep control of the House. 2024 was one of the most unproductive years when it came to bills being passed in the United States. In the 118th Congress, only 82 bills were passed this term, which compared to the 362 laws passed by the 117th Congress isn't much. The goal for both parties is to get an overwhelming majority in the House to keep from bills being stalled by a few people. That being said, let's get to some of these races. Going to Ohio's 9th District, CNN is reporting that with 41% of the votes counted, current Democratic incumbent Marcy Kupfer holds 54% of the votes, while Republican Derek Merrin holds 44% of the votes. Moving over to Connecticut's 5th District, CNN is reporting that with 4% of the votes counted, Hayes holds 58% of the votes, while Republican Logan holds 42% of the votes. It's going to be a long night for many candidates. I have more results for you shortly.
Now let's turn our attention to the upper chambers of Congress, the Senate, where the situation is flipped. Democrats are trying to keep their slim majority, and Republicans think they have the right candidates to oust red state Democrats. Here to explain it all to us is U.S. Senate anchor Kendall Stewart.
Thank you, Calvin, and good evening, everyone. This year's Senate race is shaping up to be an exciting one. Democrats currently hold 51 seats in the Senate, while Republicans hold 49. That means the GOP only has to pick up 2 seats to regain control. While the Democrats can't afford to lose any, that's going to be easier said than done. The Democrats are defending 23 seats to the Republicans' 11, and making the math even harder for Dems in West Virginia. Once a reliable blue state, the state is now solidly red. All polls and predictions show the Democratic seat will go to Republican. That means Republicans need 1 seat for control, and that could come from Montana. In fact, I have some results for you right now. Going to the state of Indiana, news source CNN reports with 37% of the votes in, with projected winner Republican Banks ahead with 62% of the vote, and Democrat McRae with 36%. Now going to the race in Vermont, news source CNN reports with 27% of the votes counted, with projected winner Bernie Sanders and with 60%, and Republican Gerald Malloy with 36%. I'll keep you updated throughout the night on how the U.S. Senate race is playing out in all the key states. Calvin, back to you.
Thank you, Kendall. This year, Tennessee has another high-profile Senate race on its hands. In 2018, Republican Marsha Blackburn beat out popular former Democratic Governor Phil Bredesen to become the first female from the U.S. Senator from the volunteer state. It was a pinnacle of a political career spanning decades. Here's how Senator Marsha Blackburn got to where she is today.
Marsha Blackburn was elected to the U.S. Senate in 2018, becoming the first woman in history to represent Tennessee in the upper chamber. She beat out popular former Democratic Governor Phil Bredesen by a large margin, winning all but 3 states.
Tennesseans also want to have a U.S. Senator who is going to work to build the wall and ban sanctuary cities.
This was the most counties ever won in an open Senate election. Blackburn is a Tea Party Republican and has been called staunchly conservative.
And she said, I'm going to protect the tax cuts, I'm going to repeal Obamacare, and we're going to stop the criminals who are marching toward our border.
During her first year in the Senate, GovTrack estimated her to be the most ideological conservative member of the Senate. This year, Blackburn served as chairperson for the Republican National Committee's official party platform. She's a fierce supporter of Trump.
Let me ask you a question. Who is going to look at those 85,000 IRS agents and say, "You're fired, Donald Trump"?
After Biden won the 2020 United States presidential election, Blackburn supported Trump's false claims of victory and raised funds to support the Trump campaign's efforts to overturn the election results in court.
I am Marsha Blackburn from the great state of Tennessee.
During her tenure in the Senate, Blackburn has focused on rural constituents and school programs. In 2023, Blackburn introduced the Rural Health Agenda Act. The agenda housed 3 bills: the Rural Health Innovation Act, the Rural America Health Core Act, and the Save Rural Hospitals Act. She said her goal was to make quality care accessible close to people's homes. In March of this year, Blackburn introduced the Bipartisan After School Act. This would establish a grant to local communities to help maintain and strengthen after-school programs to stop the increase of crime rising in Shelby County and other counties. While the bill is still in committee, it has been endorsed by Memphis Mayor Paul Young and Shelby County Mayor Lee Harris.
And it is indeed a testament to building consensus around bipartisan solutions that are going to last.
Democratic State Representative Gloria Johnson catapulted onto the national stage as a member of the so-called Tennessee Three. They got their nickname after her Republican colleagues in the state house tried to expel her and 2 others, including local state representative Justin Pearson. Now she hopes her name and recognition and stance on more liberal issues will be a winning combination to unseat U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn.
State Representative Gloria Johnson was born in Denver, Colorado. She attended University of Tennessee, Knoxville, where she has been ever since. She has her bachelor's in arts, special education, and teaching. As a 27-year special needs educator at Knoxville Central High School, Johnson says she grew disheartened by Tennessee's elected leaders criticizing public school students' rights.
I have never felt more ready to fight for Tennessee that works for all of us.
She also says she understands the impact of being a victim of gun violence at a young age.
We're going to continue to build that coalition. We will not be divided, and that is how we'll win this race.
That's because in August 2008, sophomore student Ryan McDonald was shot in the chest by a fellow student in the school cafeteria.
This took place only a few feet away from the school's officer, who was doing paperwork close by. So she decided to do something about it. In 2012, she ran for the Tennessee House in Knoxville and won. She has fought for her students and teachers ever since.
You have to be accessible to every voter.
The 2008 incident provides context to her stance on gun control, which is a central issue in her campaign and led to her nearly being expelled from the Tennessee House as a part of the Tennessee Three.
There's one common denominator. It's the guns. It's the people that have the guns, because we are not doing anything to make sure that people who are not safe don't have guns.
The nickname was given to her Nashville Representative Justin Jones and Memphis Representative Justin Pearson after they joined demonstrators in the chamber's public galleries during a legislative session 3 days after the 2023 Nashville school shooting. Jones and Pearson were expelled. In addition to gun control, Johnson is also running on protecting abortion rights. She has been open about being a survivor of a medically necessary abortion.
80% of Tennesseans want abortion care on some level.
Quality and affordable health care, along with increasing public school funding, are also part of her platform.
I'm Gloria Johnson, and I'm running for U.S. Senate.
Presidential results are pouring in, and I've got some new numbers for you, starting with North Carolina. News source CNN is reporting, with no projected winner at this current time, and 17% of the total votes counted, that Harris has 48% of the votes, while former President Donald Trump has 51% of the votes. Coming into the night, people believe that the race was virtually tied. Going to Pennsylvania, the Keystone State. News source CNN is reporting, with no projected winner at this current time, and only 11% of the total votes counted, Harris has 70% of the votes, while former President Donald Trump has 29% of the votes. Both candidates spent their final campaigning days campaigning in the state, trying to pick up those 19 electoral college votes, more than any swing state. Going to the Peach State, Georgia. News source CNN is reporting, with no projected winner at this current time, and 54% of the total votes counted, Harris has 44% of the votes, while former President Donald Trump has 56% of the votes. Georgia has 16 electoral college votes, which is crucial for both Harris and Trump to pick up those votes. Now moving on to Maryland. News source Politico is reporting that Harris is the projected winner at this current time, with only 1% of the votes counted. Harris has 30% of the votes, where former President Donald Trump has 67% of the votes. Now moving to Alabama. News source Politico is reporting that Trump is the projected winner. Harris has 30% of the votes, where former President Trump has 69% of the votes. We're moving to Illinois. News source CNN is reporting, with no projected winner at this current time, and 5% of the total votes counted, Harris has 60% of the votes, while former President Donald Trump has 38% of the votes. Now let's get into an update on the U.S. Senate with anchor Kendall Stewart.
That's right, Calvin. We are getting the first numbers in from Ohio, where the GOP hope to pick up a seat. In Ohio, there's currently no projected winner at this time, with CNN reporting with 42% of the votes in, with Democrat incumbent Sherrod Brown ahead with 50% of the votes, and Republican Marino with 47%. Now let's moving on to the state of Pennsylvania. News source CNN reports with 11% of the votes in, with Democrat incumbent Bob Casey with 70% of the votes, and Republican McCormick with 28%. Now in Michigan, news source CNN reports with 6% of the votes in, with Democrat Alyssa Slockins ahead with 58%, and Republican Rogers with 39%. Now in Tennessee, news source CNN reports with 29% of the votes in, with projected winner Marsha Blackburn ahead with 74% of the votes, and Democrat Gloria Johnson with 25%. Now in Connecticut, CNN reports with 1% of the votes in, with Democrat incumbent Chris Murphy ahead with 60% of the votes, and Republican Corey with 39%. Now, Finally, in West Virginia, news source CNN reports with 35% of the votes, with projected winner Republican Jim Justice with 67% of the votes, and Democrat Glenn Elliott with 30. I'll be back in the next half hour with more results. Back to you, Calvin.
Kendall, with such strong opinions from both parties on a hot-button issue, how do you see the factors playing out in the Senate?
Well, Calvin, the relevance of these issues is significant. Senators like Catherine Cortez Masto in Nevada are campaigning heavily on protecting reproductive rights, linking it to personal freedoms, which resonates with suburban women voters. Republicans have had 2 years to figure out a response since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and they are coming up empty-handed. On the other side, Republicans like Rick Scott in Florida are framing immigration as a key issue, arguing for stronger border security. This strategy aims to energize their base and attract undecided voters concerned about safety and economic impacts. This has always been an Achilles heel for Democrats for as long as I can remember. The contrasting strategies are pivotal in shaping the races. Thank you, Calvin. Back to you.
Thank you, Kendall. Let's find out if the Democrats have enough momentum to chip away at the Republican slim majority. Tyler Curry has an update on the battle for the House.
Hey, Calvin. We're going to start in New Jersey's 7th District, where CNN reports that with 17% of the votes counted, current Republican incumbent Thomas Keene Jr. holds 47% of the votes, while his Democratic opponent Altman holds 52% of the votes. Moving over to Michigan's 7th District, CNN is reporting that with 9% of the votes counted, Hurdle is falling behind with 38% of the votes, while his Republican opponent Tom Barrett holds 58%. Looking at North Carolina's 1st District, CNN is reporting that with 26% of the votes counted, current Democratic incumbent Donald Davis holds 53% of the votes, while his Republican opponent Lori Buckout is falling behind with 44%. Now, Davis is running for re-election, but before that, he has a long history of helping out the state, whereas he served as mayor of Snow Hill for 7 years, and before that was elected to Congress, where he served as Senate on 2 separate occasions. But Buckout's campaign is focused on supporting working families in the district, meaning that many voters may be split on who they want to run their state. Moving over to Tennessee's 8th District, ABC News is reporting that with 89% of the votes counted, Democrat Freeman holds 24% of the votes, where Republican Kustoff is taking the lead with 75%. Looking at the 17th District of Illinois, CNN is reporting that with 3% of the votes counted, current Democratic incumbent Eric Sorensen holds 43% of the votes, while Republican McGraw holds 57% of the votes. We're working to get more results for you. I'll have those in about 20 minutes. Calvin?
Immigration has been a touchstone of the U.S. political debate for decades. However, Congress has continued to disagree on a comprehensive immigration reform, effectively moving some major policy decisions into the executive and judicial branches of government. GHS TV partnered with Ms. Thorpe's government class to bring you The Road to Election. Shontario Jones and Aaron Johnson tells us where the candidates stand.
According to the former president's website, he will, quote, shut down Biden's border disaster, end quote. Mr. Trump wants to restore the Remain in Mexico program and complete the construction of the border wall. He promises to carry out the, quote, largest domestic deportation operation in American history, end quote. This will require relocating military troops to the U.S.-Mexico border, authorizing Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, raids of workplaces denying due to process to unauthorized migrants, constructing additional ICE detention facilities along the southern border, and overturning the Flores settlement, which provides protections for migrant children. He wants to end birthright citizenship for children of undocumented immigrants. Finally, he would give automatic green cards for non-citizen graduates of U.S. colleges and universities.
On the other side of the aisle, Vice President Harris' campaign website says she and Governor Walz, quote, believe in tough, smart solutions to secure the border, keep communities safe, and reform our broken immigration system. As vice president, she supported the bipartisan border security bill, the strongest reform in decades. After the bill's failure to pass in, she and President Biden acted on their own, and now border crossings are at the lowest level in 4 years. Their administration is seizing record amounts of fentanyl and secured funding for the most significant increase in border agents in 10 years. As president, she says she will bring back the bipartisan border security bill and sign it into law. At the same time, she says she knows that the immigration system is broken and needs comprehensive reform that includes strong border security and an urgent pathway to citizenship.
Every year, the election brings up questions about the state of our democracy. Is it functioning properly? Can it improve? And are there checks and balances? Our U.S. House anchor Tyler Curry spoke with University of Memphis professor Ebony Dawkins about this year's election.
Now, I don't want to bore our viewers with a government lesson, but can you first briefly explain the three branches of government?
Yes, so in our federal government, or the central form of our government, there are three branches of government. You have the legislative branch of government, that's the lawmaking branch. Most people understand this to be the House of Representatives and the Senate. And then you have the executive branch of government. This is the office of the president, the office of the vice president, and then all of the kind of bureaucratic offices that kind of work the executive function of our government. And then finally, there's the judiciary branch of government. Now, in our federal government, this is primarily the United States Supreme Court, but then there are also other courts in our federal government. You have district courts and you also have courts of appeal. So as people file cases, maybe because they don't like a law that was made by the legislative branch, or if they're upset about something that was done by the executive branch, they might file a lawsuit. And that is how we learn about how the different branches of government work and what the law is.
And what checks and balances are put in place so that one branch isn't more powerful than another? And how well do they work?
So there are multiple kind of ways in which we think about checks and balances. So first, within the articles of the U.S. Constitution, Articles 1, 2, and 3, that kind of create the different branches of government, there are rules that are put in place about what each branch of government has the right to do. In that, there are limitations that are already in place in the U.S. Constitution, but also in the few hundred years that our country has been a country, there have been lots of changes and rules that have been made, either by way of practice, by way of habit, or in some cases by way of Supreme Court rulings that tell us what each branch of government can do and cannot do.
Now, former President Donald Trump, some say that he really tested our system and some say that he nearly broke it. So what would a win for President Trump mean for our system this time around?
That's a really heavy question, and I think it depends kind of on what it is that you would like to see. So there are people who support former President Donald Trump. There are people who support him as a candidate. And no doubt in their mind, their belief is that if President Donald Trump were to win an election, that this would have positive impacts for the government. In many cases, people are thinking a lot more about opportunities in them for business or opportunities for them to potentially make money. But then there are also people who quite rightfully are concerned about a win for former President Donald Trump. And that is because in addition to, his promises with respect to business and wealth generation, there are also a lot of concerning things that are being said about the rights of women, the rights of people who are LGBTQ, even kind of, I think about it as the rights of students when we think about what's happening with the United States Department of Education by way of example. And in that sense, I think that an argument can certainly be made that a win for President Trump, we might begin to feel in our day-to-day lives kind of a backsliding of what we have enjoyed or what we have believed to be our rights in this country.
Now, the Supreme Court has weighed in on a lot of hot issues as of recently. They even agreed to review a Tennessee law banning transgender affirming care for minors this term. Each time they hand down a ruling, it sounds like it's going against the opinions of majority of Americans. So why is that?
There are a lot of reasons for that. I try not to be too partisan in conversations about what's happening with the United States Supreme Court, but I can tell you as a teacher of public law and also a scholar that is looking at the impact of our courts on our everyday experience, one of the major issues that we are seeing is that with lifelong federal appointments, there's not as much oversight over our federal courts and even over some state court positions as over other branches of government. And quite frankly, this has led to some issues with regard to folks who are in the Supreme Court having interests that are divergent from the interests of the people. So one example of this is last year when the United States Supreme Court was handing down a decision that effectively overturned Roe versus Wade. Before that decision came down, Justice Clarence Thomas was quoted in, I believe it was the New York Times newspaper, basically saying that the Supreme Court does not have to make decisions that the people of the United States will necessarily agree with or be happy with. Now, this is very interesting because it is actually the opposite of what Supreme Court justices in previous years have said. Historically, the United States Supreme Court has understood its role to be not only interpreting the law, but also interpreting the law in the way that the people that exist right now in this moment understand it. And so we are experiencing a time right now where the people of the United States have one idea about what it means to be free, about what it means to live in a multicultural society, about what it means to be inclusive. We want more of our neighbors, more of our classmates, more of our friends, more of our family members to also experience full freedom in the United States. And unfortunately, we're currently dealing with a United States Supreme Court that doesn't believe that their role is to follow what it is that the people of the United States wish to see.
Overall, why does one person's vote truly matter?
Every vote counts because you're here. And the rules that are made in our society will affect you. And voting is the first opportunity that you have in order to register what your desire is and make your voice known. And so I always say, don't silence yourself, right? Make your voice known when you have the opportunity and in the manner that's provided for you.
Well, Professor Dawkins, this conversation was very helpful. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
More interviews are headed your way. Plus, we got the latest results from tonight's exciting races. But right now, we're going to take a short break. GHS TV's live coverage of Election Night 2024 will be right back.
Cut to one and cue talent.
The GHS Fine Arts Department is composed of 6 different disciplines, including instrumental music, which is both band and the strings or orchestra.
My belief is that band is the life of the school. If the band's not fun, the school's not fun.
There's choral music with a variety of different levels for our students, from women's choir, an a cappella group.
So choir is an excellent opportunity for you to engage in the music making process and to create relationships and bonds with your fellow classmates.
We have our theater program, which includes acting and tech theater.
It'll teach you how to be a better communicator, it'll teach you how to work with people better, and it'll teach you how to get outside your comfort zone.
We have GHS TV and the intro classes that go into GHS TV.
You're watching the award-winning GHS TV, a nationally recognized student television station.
Welcome to GHS Insider, the show that's all about the G.
So GHS TV tries to model a real working station.
And we have a visual arts program that goes up into AP courses and also includes IB level.
I think the arts are really important because they provide students with that safe space where they can express themselves, they can be who they really want to be.
The specificity of what is taught and required to be learned here in this department is so particular that they're going away with abilities and skills that other schools aren't teaching.
For more information about the Kappa program, visit ghskappa.com or call 755-7775. You're watching the award-winning GHS TV, a nationally recognized student television station.
Welcome back to GHS TV's live coverage of the 2024 election. I'm your moderator, Calvin Nicholson, and the results are really starting to come in. I have a few updates from some key states, starting with Wisconsin. News source CNN is reporting with no projected winner at this current time, and 1% of the votes counted. Harris has 53% of the votes, while Trump has 46% of the votes. Voters in Wisconsin are some of the most unpredictable in the United States because of their status and history of going back and forth. Going to Michigan, news source CNN is reported with no projected winner at this current time, and 8% of the total votes counted. Harris has 53% of the votes, while former President Donald Trump has 55% of the votes. In 2016, Trump was the first Republican to actually win Michigan since 1988. Moving on to Arkansas, news source CNN is reporting that Trump is the projected winner with 13% of the votes, total votes counted. Harris has 50% of the votes, while Trump has 49% of the votes. Moving on to the Nutmeg State, news source Politico is reporting that Harris is the projected winner with 6% of the total votes counted. Harris has 57% of the votes, while former President Donald Trump has 41% of the votes. Moving on to Kentucky, the Bluegrass State. News source Politico is reporting that Trump is the projected winner with 78% of the total votes counted. Harris has 35% of the votes, and Trump has 63% of the votes, which is no surprise, meaning that Kentucky does swing more Republican than anything. And it's been a Republican state for quite some years. But the migrants just still tell us that it's anyone's race. Let's check back in with Senate anchor Kendall Stewart to get an update on the situation.
Thanks, Calvin. Wisconsin's Democrat incumbent Tammy Baldwin has held her chair since 2012. Now our updates in Delaware. News source ABC reports with 59% of the votes counted, with Democrat Lisa Rochester ahead by 56% and Republican Hansen with 40%. Now in Maryland, news source Politico reports with no projected winner at this time, with 30% of the votes counted. Democrat also Brooks is ahead with 63% of the votes in, and Republican Hogan with 37% of the votes. Now in Florida, news source CNN reports with 87% of the votes in, with projected winner Republican Rick Scott with 56% of the votes, and Debbie Powell with 42%. Now in New York, news source CNN reports with 20% of the votes counted, with 21% of the votes counted, with Democrat incumbent Kirsten Gillibrand with 71% of the votes, and Republican Mike Seppercon with 29%. And finally, in Mississippi, news source CNN reports with 11% of the votes counted, with projected winner Republican incumbent Roger Wicker with 61% of the votes, and Democrat Pinkins with 39%. Those are all the results I currently have for you at the moment. Calvin?
We're going to toss back to Tyler, our U.S. House of Representatives anchor.
Thanks, Calvin. Races are really starting to pile in, and I have a few more results for you. Moving over to New York's 22nd district, USA Today reports that with 6% of the votes counted, current Republican incumbent Brandon Williams is falling behind with 48% of the votes, while his Democratic opponent Mannion holds 52% of the votes. Moving over to Nebraska's 2nd district, USA Today reports that with 46% of the votes counted, current Republican incumbent Bacon holds 43% of the votes, while Democratic opponent Tony Vargas holds 57% of the votes. Looking at New Mexico's 2nd District, CNN reports that with 3% of the votes counted, Democratic incumbent Gabriel Vasquez holds 53% of the votes, while his Republican opponent, Harold, is falling behind with 47% of the votes. Now, this election is a rematch of the 2022 election, where Vasquez won by a 1,350 vote margin out of more than 192,000 vote cast. Checking back in with Connecticut's 5th District, USA Today reports that with 2% of the votes counted, Democratic incumbent Joanna Hayes holds 57% of the votes, while her Republican opponent Logan is falling behind with 43% of the votes. Looking at Michigan's 10th District, CNN reports that with 3% of the votes counted, Republican incumbent John James is taking the lead with 59% of the votes, while his Democratic opponent Carl Malinga holds 37% of the votes. That's all the results I have for you right now. Back to you, Calvin.
Thank you, Tyler. For over 4 months ago, Vice President Kamala Harris was running for a second term as second in command. That all changed July 21st when President Joe Biden announced he was stepping down from the race and endorsing Harris for president. What followed was a strong campaign as she pushed her name and policies out there for everyone to know. So who is Kamala Harris? Let's find out.
Kamala Harris was born October 20th, 1964, in Oakland, California. She then graduated from the University of California, Hastings College of Law with a Juris Doctorate. In 1990, she began her law career in the office of the District Attorney of Alameda County as the Deputy District Attorney. In 2002, Harris ran for District Attorney of San Francisco. In the 2010 California Attorney General election, Harris defeated Los Angeles District Attorney Steve Cooley. She became the first African American and South Asian American to hold the office.
We are not taking care of and protecting victims of very significant crimes who deserve to have their voices heard.
January of 2015, Harris announced her candidacy for the Senate seat in California. President Barack Obama and Vice President Joe Biden endorsed Harris.
The only African-American woman that ever been elected to the United States Senate.
After she won, she promised to protect immigrants from the policies of Donald Trump. As a senator, Harris advocated stricter gun control laws. In January 2019, Harris announced her candidacy for the President of the United States in the 2020 presidential election.
So today, I say to you, my friends, these are not ordinary times, and this will not be an ordinary election. But this is our America.
In December of 2019, Harris withdrew from the 2020 presidential election because of a shortage of funds.
We're all in this fight. You, me, and Joe. Together.
On August 11, 2020, Biden announced that he chose Harris as his running mate. Harris was sworn in as vice president on January 20th, 2021. She was the first woman vice president and the first African American and Asian American to hold the office. Harris served as acting president on November 19, 2021, while Biden underwent a colonoscopy. She was the first woman and the third person overall to assume the power and duties of the presidency as acting president of the United States. On July 21, 2024, Joe Biden suspended his campaign for re-election in 2024 and endorsed Harris for president.
Let me ask you, are you ready to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz?
If elected, Harris will be the first female and first Asian American president of the United States, and the second African American president after President Barack Obama. She announced Tim Walz as her running mate in August. On August 22, 2024, Harris officially accepted the Democratic nomination for president.
I'm running for president because I love my country. I love my country.
Mark White has been a staple of the Germantown community for decades. First as a private school principal, then as a Tennessee state representative. He used his education background to lead a powerful education committee in Nashville. GHS TV's Chris Pina sat down with Mr. White to discuss the impact he's had on education across the state.
Representative Mark White, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be here.
I understand you've been in office for over 14 years. Why do you feel the need to run again?
Right. Actually 15. I came in a special election in 2010. Throughout my career, I started out my career as a teacher and a principal. I loved children and education. Went into small business for about 25 years. And then the opportunity came along to run for office. And so I just feel a special need to be in government to make sure that we're helping our young people in education the best way possible.
I understand your district changed just ahead of the 2022 election. How are you getting used to your new constituents?
Right, changed a little bit every 10 years because of the census taken. Our districts do change from the 2020 thing. I picked up a little bit more of Cordova this time and lost some of East Memphis area. But you know, you just got to get out and constantly have meetings, go to events around town, and continue to be out in the public.
I understand you have an opponent this time around, Noah Nordstrom, and he's a current teacher at Central High School. How do you feel about running against a local fellow educator?
Well, I'm glad that Noah is interested enough in education that he wants to put himself out there, such as I have, having been a teacher and a principal myself. It's great to have an understanding of what it's like to be in the classroom, so I commend him for jumping in.
Representative White, Noah Nordstrom states that the reason he runs against you is your support of vouchers. But according to polls, Tennessee's opinion on vouchers is mixed at best.
Right.
Why do you and the governor keep pushing forward?
Right, the governor, he, as you know, with the voucher bill we had last year called Education Freedom, what I look at is what we're trying to do. Let's take the student, not the system, but the individual student. What are the needs of each individual student? Let me give you a quick comparison. If you lived in a neighborhood where there's only one grocery store and you were not allowed to go outside your neighborhood to go shopping anywhere else but that one grocery store, and that one grocery store didn't have good meat, good fruit, good vegetables, would you not want to be able to say, hey, there's a grocery store about 5 blocks away or across town that does have good produce? Would you not want to be able to go over there? And so what we try to do is give opportunities to students and do the best we can to also protect the students. I'm a strong supporter of public schools. I'm a strong supporter of charters and privates. I'm a strong supporter of education. But education, the bottom line is to educate the child, the student, and not protect systems.
Well, in February, you filed legislation to appoint MCS school board members, citing your frustration with the elected leaders. But you've since backed down. What was your reasoning behind this?
Well, we began to talk with, they brought in a new superintendent who I stay in constant contact with. She's working very hard. There's an election coming up for a new school board, or at least 5 new members, so I'm giving them time to get on board. We'll go back in session next January, and if you have the opportunity, we'll keep putting attention onto that. Memphis Shelby County School System has over 100,000 students. We have Ford, we have Elon Musk, we have all these industries coming to our town, and when you continue to perform at 23% proficiency in reading, less than that in math, we're not pushing out the type of student that our community needs. And so I ran the bill, did not run the bill, finish it, but I put the bill out there saying, look, we need to be serious about our children's education. So we'll keep going forward. My goal is to make sure that we are all performing. Germantown High School, by the way, is doing very well, and as well as Germantown Municipal District, which we're sitting in, doing very well. So we can do better, but we've got to keep the pressure on.
Well, I also want to touch on the 3rd grade retention law. It caused a lot of stress among students, teachers, and parents. Have things kind of smoothed out throughout the year?
Well, a lot of times when we originally passed it in 2021, called the Learning Loss Bill coming out of COVID, we knew that we had only 1 out of 3 that were reading proficiency as far as our end of course tests. So what we want to say, look, it's really more of an intervention bill. We had like 9 off-ramps where if your child did poorly on the TCAP or in the course, you could still file for waivers and appeals and things like that. And so really, I think even at the end of the day, only like 1.4% were held back. But I think it's important that we put enough attention that we cannot continue to move students forward through the 12th grade that cannot adequately read, because then learning is not fun. And it's difficult, and therefore you either drop out or you don't benefit from the 12, 13 years that you've been in school. So we put that out there, we put off ramps, but we're going to continue to say, look, and now what we're looking at, because we did that, is why are we talking about third grade retention? Why are we talking about holding back an 8-year-old? Let's look at K1 and 2. We should be preparing our students in kindergarten, first and second grade, so that we're not talking about third grade retentions. So we passed a bill to bring attention to an issue that needed to be brought.
Now, Representative Mark White, if reelected, what are some of the future education bills that'll come?
Well, we'll continue to look at, I look at a lot of things on how can we better improve high school. For example, I was up with Governor Jeb Bush, who used to be the governor of Florida. He was an education governor. And we're looking at rethinking high school. You know, now with all the CTE that we're looking at, and because all the demands on our workforce, are we doing the right thing in high school to make sure that we're not wasting a student's year, especially when they get into the 11th and 12th grade? We will continue to look at our early childhood literacy, K1 and 2 and 3 and 4. If you are, as a student, can read proficiently, learn proficiently, then high school and middle school become much, much easier, because now you're enjoying studying things that, because you have the proficiency of reading. It's that important.
Representative Mark White, thank you so much for spending your time with us. This has been such an interesting conversation.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity and the invitation, and I congratulate Germantown High School. Thank you.
According to MemphisVote.org, registration among 18-year-olds is up 53% from the year 2020. Memphis Grizzlies had a hand in that this year. On National Voter Registration Day, they invited high school seniors from around the county to the FedEx Forum to register to vote. GHS was among those schools. GHS TV reporter Dallas Horn and videographer Delette Duran captured this inspiring event.
Welcome to the 2024 Voter Registration Educational Rally.
Here today at the FedEx Forum, the Grizzlies, alongside with our Soro girls, the Delta, are here today to get kids enthusiastic about the voting process, make sure that they are, one, logistically able to vote, and then just getting them excited.
I wanted to be here because it gave me a little more insight on voting. With me just turning 18 and all, I just felt like I didn't want to go in blind on my first day when I actually go and cast my ballot.
I wanted to be here to get the experience of, registering to vote and going through that process and being into the politics.
It's important because young people are our fastest growing demographic, and they also don't vote, right? And so I think if you can reach folks, with the Grizzlies, any kind of way you can reach folks to make them realize the importance of voting, that's why you need to do it.
To my right, I have one of our special rookies. I have Jalen Wells. Everybody say, hey, Jalen.
You live in this place, so you want to be able to have a voice and be able to make change.
Today it was very educational, very informative. It was fun. Everybody come together to help the young people so they can learn more about voting.
Early vote, y'all can go anywhere that you want to go.
The experience was very educational, and I learned a lot about who to vote for and what's the best way to pick someone to vote for.
I had a really good time, just walking around, talking to some of the people and the resources that they provided for us, and just really getting a look at what I'll be voting.
And I think after today, I hope it gets folks excited and that they will not only register, but they will vote.
Today, to be a part of seeing our young students from Germantown get that power has been pretty amazing.
This event gave me a little more insight and dates and actually helping prepare me to vote.
The nation has voted early and on Election Day. The results are rolling in, and here are some updates. Starting with Maine, news source CNN is reporting with no projected winner. With 3% of the votes counted, Harris has 49%, while Trump has 48%. This year's pollsters predicted that the next president will be decided by that one electoral college vote. Moving on to Nebraska Congressional District 2. News source CNN is reporting with no projected winner at this current time. With 30% of the total overall votes counted, Harris has 53% of the votes, while Trump has 46% of the vote. The district mostly swings rule, but it is a surprise that Harris is leading in the state right now. Going over to Minnesota. News source CNN is reporting with no projected winner at this current time, with 1% of the total votes counted, Harris has 45% of the votes, while Trump has 55% of the votes. Biden won the state by 7% back in 2020. Moving on to Delaware. News source Politico is reporting that Harris is the projected winner at this current time, with 64% of the total votes counted. Harris has 57% of the votes, while Trump has 42% of the votes. Moving on to Mississippi. News source Politico is reporting that Trump is the projected winner, with 26% of the total votes counted. Harris has 36% of the votes, while Trump has 62% of the votes. Going on to Massachusetts, the Bay State. News source CNN is reporting that Harris is the projected winner, with 15% of the total votes counted. Harris has 60% of the votes, while Trump has 37% of the votes. Now back to the race that controls the U.S. Senate. Kendall Stewart, give us an update on the latest race.
Thanks, Calvin. Well, we do have some projected winners in. Let's start off with the state of Texas. News source CNN reports with 65% of the votes in. There's currently no projected winner at this time, with Republican incumbent Ted Cruz ahead with 52% and Democrat Allred with 46%. Now let's move on to the state of Michigan. News source CNN reports with 12% of the votes in, with Democrat Alyssa Slockins ahead with 55% of the votes and Republican Rogers with 42%. The Michigan seat is open after Debbie Stabnow's retirement. Now in Nebraska, news source CNN reports with 30% of the votes counted, with Republican incumbent Deb Fischer with 45% of the votes and independent Osborne with 55%. Now in New Jersey, news source CNN reports with 51% of the votes counted, with Democrat Andrew Kim ahead with 55% of the votes and Republican Bashaw with 43%. And finally, in Missouri, news source CNN reports with 21% of the votes counted, with Republican incumbent Josh Hawley with 46% and Democrat Kuntz with 52%. That's all I have for you right now. I'll be back with more results in a few minutes. Calvin?
Let's shift our focus to the House races. Tyler Curry is back with more results.
Thanks, Calvin. The races are really starting to pick up pace. Looking at Wisconsin's 3rd district, CNN is reporting that with 4% of the votes counted, Democrat Cook is behind with 43% of the votes, while his Republican opponent, Van Orden, is ahead with 57% of the votes. Moving over to Pennsylvania's 10th district, CNN is reporting that with 34% of the votes counted, Democrat Stelson is ahead with 59% of the votes, and Republican Perry is behind with 41% of the votes. Looking at Iowa's 3rd district, CNN is reporting that with 52% of the votes counted, Republican incumbent Zach Nunn is falling behind with 44% of the votes, with his Democratic opponent Beckham taking the lead with 56% of the votes. Now, moving over to Iowa's 1st district, CNN reports that with 3% of the votes counted, there is an open seat here, with Democrat Christina Bohannon taking the lead with 52% of the votes, and her Republican opponent, Marionette Miller Meeks, falling behind with 48% of the votes. Finally, looking at Tennessee's 8th district, the Tennessean reports that with 54% of the votes counted, there is a projected winner. Current Republican incumbent David Kustoff is taking the lead with 74% of the votes, and Democrat Sarah Freeman is falling behind with 24% of the votes. Things are heating up, Calvin. I'll be back with more results later.
Thanks for the race update, Tyler. But before we move on, one of the top election issues this year has been immigration. While migrants crossing at the borders are down, fake rumors like the stories about the Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, has started to arise. What gives, Tyler?
Well, Calvin, immigration has always been considered a controversial issue, but it's a winning issue for Republicans in elections. Earlier this year, the House presented a bipartisan immigration bill that would have been the strictest in U.S. history. It had support from both sides in the House and the Senate. However, days before the vote, former President Trump made some calls and the bill died. The theory is that he wanted to keep the issue alive so he could run on immigration. And here we are now talking about it. And we'll still be talking about it after the election because the problem hasn't been solved. Thank you, Calvin. Back to you.
Thank you, Tyler. We're going to turn now to an issue that plagues the presidential election every 4 years, the economy. Most voters cite this as their top concern, and this year is no exception. Both presidential candidates have made bold promises about tax cuts that they likely cannot keep, in an effort to appeal to voters that feel pinched. For more on Harris and Trump's economic plans, here are some government students.
Harris says her economic policy is based on creating opportunities for the middle class. The Biden-Harris administration has focused on making public investments in infrastructure and green energy, challenging monopolistic consolidation, and raising taxes on corporations and the wealthiest Americans to pay for a surge in spending. Specific policy proposals are a $6,000 child tax credit, $25,000 down payment for first-time home buyers, $50,000 startup grants for new businesses, raising minimum wage, and eliminating taxes on tips.
As former President Trump emphasized tax cuts and deregulatory economic policies, which he says spurred growth, innovation, and employment. He says government spending needs massive cuts to bring down inflation. Specific policy proposals are further lowering the corporate tax rate to 15% for firms that make the goods in the United States and eliminating taxes on tips and Social Security benefits. He wants to reduce the power and independence of federal agencies, which he says are responsible for a regulatory onslaught. He wants Congress to take drastic steps in bringing down spending, including using the debt ceiling as a bargaining chip. However, he has opposed any cuts to the programs that make up the bulk of the budget, such as Social Security, Medicare, or defense.
Stay with us as we continue to bring you the latest updates on this election results. But right now, we're going to take a short break.
You're watching the award-winning GHS TV, a nationally recognized student television station.
Hello, and welcome to another season of Red Devil Postgame.
So GHS TV tries to model a real working station.
I really thought it was cool when I first started studio and all the opportunities that it was able to provide for me.
That would be 36 out of 36.
It's a rigorous class that demands a lot from students.
At times you are going to be thrown into the fire to where you're just going to have to figure it out yourself.
Which is really great because then we gain more knowledge. Our teachers will give us how to start, but then we're left to make up the whole entire process.
It just seems to me it's not enough space in the beginning. If it's not, let's figure out what we can do.
They can be a producer, they can be a director, they can work graphics and learn audio. They can go out and shoot field reports.
Akila, back to you.
And it's a challenge to throw them into the environment and say, here's a camera, go out and record this interview and some B-roll. But those are the challenges that grow students to do bigger projects.
Welcome to Red Devil Newsbeat.
In GHS TV, we have a variety of shows. We have Crosstalk.
Hello, and welcome to GHS TV's award-winning talk show, Crosstalk.
We have Insider, which is all about Germantown.
Hello and welcome to GHS Insider, the show that's all about the G.
Some things that I've learned from this class is that how to work as a team.
We learn how to communicate better with people.
Something I'll take with me from in the future is their slogan, check, double check, and check again.
There's so many different things you can do here. I would say take risks. Push yourself further than you think you can go, and we will help guide you there.
Go Red Devils!
For more information about the Kappa program, visit ghskappa.com or call 755-7775.
You're watching the award-winning GHS TV, a nationally recognized student television station.
Welcome back to Election Night 2024. I'm your moderator, Calvin Nicholson. And we had an exciting and eventful evening filled with results, and the rest of the night is promised to be just as eventful. We want to take a look at the reason why people vote. Perhaps they're an issue voter, and there are a lot of them this year, or they're a candidate voter. GHS TV's reporter Jamila Boykin and videographer Amir Abdul-Rashid and Dallas Horn went to polling locations to ask voters about issues that are important to them this election.
I'm here at a voting poll in Cordova speaking with voters to get their perspective on this election.
Well, I think this election is a lot about light and darkness, and so it was very important for me to vote in the way of light.
I'm excited about it. You know, we've got some first-time candidates, we've got some existing candidates that have served, and their voting record, you can look back and do that. You know, they can say, well, I support this, but you can look back on an existing candidate and see if they really did what they said they were going to do.
But I think if we all come together and as a whole, you know, some might not agree, but if we come together to agree to disagree, we'll move forward.
We need to get more young voters out. We need to get everybody out here to vote.
This has been the first year for 2 of my teenagers to vote, and they are very excited about having that opportunity to vote.
I feel like I need to make a change.
We need more safety for our children. There's too much gun violence, and I feel that we should be in control of our bodies as women, so I feel that we should have that right as well.
Public education is very important to my family for generations.
There's a lot of different things that need to be probably not even changed necessarily, but more evolved. Reproduction rights, firearms, all those types of things.
And I believe we should still have fair and secure elections, that people are allowed to vote for who they believe in and who they think will set this country on the right path.
If we all could just come out as a unit and get out here and vote and just see each other's way or point of view for life, and we could do better with it.
With the result of this ballot, we will soon know the direction of the next 4 years. Reporting live for Election Night 2024, I'm Jamila Boykin.
I have some new results in a few key battleground states. Let's start with North Carolina. News source CNN is reporting, with no projected winner at this current time and 61% of the overall votes counted, that Harris has 48% of the votes while Trump has 51% of the votes. North Carolina has been a predominantly red state for the past 50 years, with an exception of 2008 during the Barack Obama term. Going on to Maine, news source CNN is reporting, with no projected winner at this current time and only 7% of the overall votes counted, Harris has 51% of the votes while Trump has 47% of the votes. I want to mention that it is just a congressional district. Maine 02 is more in the more rural and western areas of Maine. Moving on to New Mexico, the land of entertainment. News source CNN is reporting, with no projected winner at this current time, with 21% of the votes counted, Harris has 49% of the votes, while Trump has 50% of the votes. Most believe that this state will most likely go to Harris due to it being more of a Democratic state and a more majority blue state. We're moving on to Nebraska. News source CNN reports, with no projected winner at this current time, 40% of the total votes counted, Harris has 50% of the votes, while Trump has 48% of the votes, which is no surprise to most people, believing that they swing more to the Democratic side as well. But it seems like it to be a close, and it's anyone's race still in the state, with only the 40% counted. Moving on to Colorado, news source CNN is reporting, with no projected winner at this current time, with 50% of the total votes counted, Harris has 56% of the votes, while former President Donald Trump has 42% of the votes. Last but surely not least, the great state of Ohio. News source CNN is reporting, with no projected winner at this current time and 70% of the total votes counted, Harris has 44% of the votes, while Trump has 56% of the votes. That's all I have for now. I will be back with more results soon. Kendall?
Thanks, Calvin. I have more updates pouring in, so let's move to the state of Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, news source Politico reports, with no projected winner at this time. With 32% of the votes counted, Democrat incumbent Tammy Baldwin is ahead with 50% of the votes, and Republican Hove with 48%. Democrat incumbent Tammy Baldwin was first elected in 2012. She is a lawyer and was the first openly LGBTQ+ member of the Senate and House. Now moving to the state of Pennsylvania. News source CNN reports with 33% of the votes counted, with Democrat incumbent Bob Casey Jr. with 52% of the votes and Republican McCormick with 46%. Now moving on in the race in Massachusetts, news source CNN reports with 16% of the votes counted, with projected winner Democrat incumbent Elizabeth Warren with 59% of the votes and Republican Deaton with 40%. Now going to North Dakota, news source CNN reports with 11% of the votes counted, with projected winner Republican incumbent Kevin Cramer with 32% of the votes and Democrat Christensen with 68%. Now in Maine, news source CNN reports with 6% of the votes and no projected winner at this time, with independent incumbent Angus King with 49% of the votes, Republican Demi Kuzunas with 36%, and Democrat David Costello with 12%. Those are all the results I have for you at the moment. Calvin, back to you.
Now back with an update on the U.S. House. Tyler?
Thanks, Calvin. Voter turnout has been high, and key races are already starting to shape up. So, looking back at some of the other races, checking in with Pennsylvania's 7th District, CNN is reporting that with 27% of the votes counted, Democrat Wild holds 52% of the votes, while his Republican opponent, McKenzie, is falling behind with 48% of the votes. Looking at New York's 17th District, CNN is reporting that with 16% of the votes counted, Jones is taking a step back with 44% of the votes, while Republican opponent Lawler is taking the lead with 53% of the votes. Moving over to Ohio's 13th District, CNN is reporting that with 48% of the votes counted, Democrat Sykes is taking the lead with 55% of the votes, while Republican opponent Kevin Coughlin is falling behind with 45% of the votes. Now, Sykes is campaigning on constituent services, while Coughlin said he's running because he feels more in line with the views and concerns of the 13th District. But both candidates have faced criticism over who's more in touch with the district. Moving over to the 17th District of Illinois, CNN is reporting that with 30% of the votes counted, both opponents are tied, with Sorensen and McGraw both holding 50% of the votes. Moving over to New York's 18th District, CNN is reporting that with 32% of the votes counted, Democratic incumbent Pat Ryan is ahead with 65% of the votes, while Republican opponent Allison Esposito is behind with 35% of the votes. Looking at Pennsylvania's 17th District, CNN is reporting that with 51% of the votes counted, Democratic incumbent Chris Deluzio is taking the lead with 59% of the votes, while Rob Mercury is falling behind with 41% of the votes. And lastly, looking at Tennessee's 9th District, ShelbyVote.com is reporting that with 59% of the votes counted, Democrat Cohen is taking the lead with 71% of the votes, while Republican opponent Charlotte Bergman is falling behind with 27% of the votes. Calvin, I'll be back soon with the latest results, but back to you.
MSCS teacher Noah Nordstrom is hoping to unseat longtime District 83 State Representative Mark White. It's a tall order for someone so young. But Nordstrom isn't new to politics. GHS TV's Chris Pina sat down with Nordstrom to discuss his political background and why he thinks the district needs new representation.
Mr. Nordstrom, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
So, as a teacher, you already have a full-time job. Why run for office?
Well, I didn't expect to be here. I was teaching last fall, and honestly, the conditions became a little overwhelming. Not just where I work, but in a lot of schools in this state, we're facing problems like shortages of books and facilities problems, overcrowded classrooms. I actually had a student pass out in class because it was so hot in August last year. And so when I realized that my state representative was actually pushing to defund our schools even more and make those conditions potentially even worse, I really started considering running for office because nobody was stepping up to challenge him for several years. You know, he had gone unopposed. And so I really thought and prayed about it and talked to some people and decided to take this on.
Well, you've told a local newspaper that Representative Mark White, the person you're running against, is, and I quote, waging a war against public schools, end quote. Can you explain your concerns?
Yeah, so he is actually the chair of the Education Committee, and as the chair, he's been pushing a bill known as the voucher bill, which would massively defund our public schools. And to make it really simple, what the vouchers would do is take money from our public school system and turn them into coupons for people to use at private schools. And these coupons will be worth $7,000 each. Well, the problem here, that's supposedly meant to save kids from public schools and send them to private schools. But these $7,000 vouchers don't actually cover the tuition of a private school. The average private school tuition in Shelby County is $12,000. That would leave families paying $5,000 out of pocket, which many families in Shelby County can't even afford. And in fact, the pilot program here that already exists in Shelby County is underutilized because it's not designed for low-income families. Another issue I have with it is that it specifically says schools that accept voucher money do not have to accommodate students with disabilities or IEPs of any sort. And that's a real issue for me because I think that all schools should treat all students equally and fairly, and we shouldn't be using our government money to subsidize schools that are not adequately taking care of the needs of all students.
So, presidential elections bring out voters, but according to Commercial Appeal, Tennessee is one of the worst states with young voter turnout. The 2020 turnout came in well below the youth voting average with a measly 43%. Can you explain how you're reaching these young voters?
Yes, and I'll go back to what we're doing. We're door to door, talking to young voters all the time. People my age, I'm 26, I would be the first Gen Z state representative, at least from this area. And, what it takes to reach young voters is being creative. It's not just going to their doors. We also have a very big presence on social media where a lot of younger voters are present. And then as well, we're texting voters. We're doing all sorts of things. We're doing what it takes to actually reach people where they are. And when you actually present people with a good option, something to vote for and not just something to vote against, you do see a huge increase because you're absolutely right. We're not just lowest in young voter turnout. We were dead last in 2022, 51st in the whole nation, including territories, in 2022 because a lot of times these districts don't even go opposed, and a lot of times we're not giving people anything to vote for. We're just trying to scare them of the other person. And so what I'm proposing is great schools everywhere, taking on this gun violence crisis in our communities and bringing people together around the issues that unite us. And I think that's something people are really desperate for.
Well, Mr. Nordstrom, why do you believe that having someone younger in office allows for more fresh ideas?
Well, I think we've seen, my opponent is an incumbent of 14 years in the district, and a lot of people like me believe in term limits. We don't believe that we should have the same people running things for generations and generations because we don't get any new feedback, we don't get any new ideas. And so I think that having younger people and having new representation in general would be very good for us to have fresher ideas and to just kind of shake up the system because right now there's such a hold on power in Nashville that the Republican supermajority is even silencing members of their own caucus that they don't agree with. They're cutting the mics for Democrats. They're expelling people like Representative Justin Jones and Pearson, and they're really abusing their power. And so I think if we want real balance and accountable government, we're going to have to elect new people. And I personally think electing younger people would be good too, to have various perspectives from different generations.
Well, on that topic, what are some of your fresh ideas?
Yeah, so number one, I think the big thing I've been focusing on is education. So the ideas they're pushing right now is to destroy public schools. So my fresh idea is to reinvest in public schools and actually move toward a community school model where our schools serve as resource centers for their community, where they look at the specific needs of those communities and provide those after hours. There's already a model for this that exists in a lot of schools, and I think we need to implement it statewide. Some other fresh ideas, something that we don't talk about a lot is the fact that over the last half a century, we've dismantled public transportation in this state. I believe that we should work with the federal government to rebuild rail, passenger rail in the state, high-speed rail for the 21st century. I believe that we need to start focusing more on our environment, protecting our aquifer, cleaning up areas where we have generational lead poisoning in Shelby County. I could go on, but I think fresh ideas means actually focusing on these real festering issues in our community that have been ignored by politicians for way too long.
Mr. Nordstrom, thank you so much for speaking with us, and good luck on your campaign.
Thank you so much for having me.
After hearing both candidates' issues, let's cover the race for the Tennessee House of Representatives. Tonight, we're taking a closer look at the race for District 83, where incumbent Mark White is seeking re-election against challenger Noah Nordstrom. Both candidates are working hard to sway voters about their vision for the future of the district. News source Shelby Vote, with no projected winner, says Nordstrom has 40% of the votes, while Mark White only has 60% of the votes. It's time for a final look at where Trump and Harris stand on the issues that matter most to young voters. Protection tops the list of 40% of reasons why adults live with households with guns. That's according to the Pew Research Center. However, 58% of adults favor stricter gun laws. It's a debate about the balance between individual rights and public safety. Government student Cassidy Scott and Korean Chapman tell us where the candidates stand.
As Vice President, Democratic nominee Kamala Harris supported the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which was the first gun safety legislation passed in 30 years. She spearheaded policies to expand background checks and close gun show loopholes. Her goal as president is to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, require universal background checks, and support red flag laws to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people.
On the Republican side, former President and GOP nominee Donald Trump says he wants to protect gun rights and defend the Second Amendment. He supports funding the better mental health support for troubled citizens and says he would add officers to personnel for more protection. In 2018, Trump banned bump stocks after the deadliest massacre in the U.S. history. A bump stock enables semi-automatic rifles to fire almost like machine guns. However, this summer, the court ruled that bump stock doesn't qualify as a machine gun under the National Firearms Act of 1934 and therefore cannot be banned. Trump's campaign supports the Supreme Court's decision.
Memphis Mayor Paul Young has been on the job for 11 months now. In that time, he secured a deal with billionaire Elon Musk, held a meeting with local gang members, and was selected to join Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative, among many other things. I had the pleasure of talking to Mayor Young about why he got into politics and what's his vision for Memphis.
Welcome to the show, Mayor Young.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
October 5th is the one-year anniversary of your election. Looking back, why do you think a large number of Memphians voted for you over the Shelby County Sheriff and a former Memphis mayor?
Well, I think I brought a lot of great energy to the city. I feel like people felt optimistic about the future of Memphis, and we wanted to connect to people in an individual way, so we worked really, really hard, knocking on doors, holding different meetings, and getting a lot of engagement. And I think there was a general sense of excitement around the possibilities. And I think that was really important to help us really get that election and be successful.
What are some campaign goals or priorities that have already been fulfilled?
Our biggest goal has been around reducing crime in the city. And while crime certainly has not been resolved by any means, we are starting to see the numbers trend in the right direction. And so that's one. Number two was really around engagement around arts and culture. And we have established an Office of Arts and Culture. We are engaging the artistic community because we believe that in order to really make Memphis what we want it to be, we have to lean into our strengths. Certainly we address our challenges like public safety, but we lean into the areas where we're strong. And arts and culture is one of the areas where we've been strong for many, many years. And so you're gonna continue to see us doing more from that front. And then lastly, I would just say engagement of young people. We've been having meetings, discussions, and opportunities to engage with young people since I've been in office, and the excitement level, the energy level has been really high, and I feel like that is truly going to be the thing that takes Memphis to the next level, is our young people really getting engaged.
Are there any priorities that are currently in the works?
Many priorities are in the works. Certainly we want to continue to work on reducing crime, and we have a number of strategies that involve what we call suppression. That means making sure we capture those that are doing the bad things, but then we're also investing in prevention and intervention at the same time. We're working to put more dollars into housing for our city. We think that housing is a very, very important stabilizing aspect for any individual's lives. And so we are maintaining what we call the Housing Trust Fund, and we are developing even more programs that are going to use city dollars to help people stay in quality, affordable housing. And that's just a couple of the programs that are underway right now.
Speaking of priorities, in the spring, you sat down with local gang leaders. As a young adult, I would like to know, is there any possibility of the city working with MSCS in order to create or develop an anti-gang violence initiative?
I would certainly be open to it. I'm glad to hear you suggest that. I think ideas like that coming from young people like yourself are going to be the ones that are going to be the best ideas. And so as we look to partner with Memphis and Shelby County Schools on many initiatives, that is one that I certainly would love to.
Let's switch gears. The city of Memphis has a unique program called the Memphis Youth Council, modeled after the Memphis City Council, with one representative from each district. Right. What is the purpose of this group, and have you met with them yet?
I have met with individuals of the group. I have not met with the full body just yet, but the purpose of it is to engage young people in leadership, politics, and to bring their voice to local decision making. And it's really important that those young people feel empowered, feel like their voices matter. When you look at politics, oftentimes young people aren't the voices that the politicians go to seek out. And oftentimes that's because young people don't really vote in droves. They don't vote in a significant number. And we want to see that change. We want young people to feel like their voices matter. And so having their voices on that youth city council is just one step towards doing that.
As you may know, there's not a lot of things for young people to do with their friends. Is there any talks of bringing any entertainment or new parks to the city?
Yeah, so we certainly are having discussions around what it would take to bring different types of entertainment venues and things like that. We're early on in those discussions, so I don't want to make any promises, but we do realize that our young people need some safe things for them to do, to just have fun, to just be a young person. We had those types of amenities when I was growing up. If you talk to people from my generation, those Gen Xers, you'll hear them talk about Liberty Land or Adventure River or Excite. These were all these different places that young people used to go just to have fun. And we want to be able to have those same types of amenities for your generation.
In your opinion, how can politicians and local voters' rights advocates stress the importance of young people's voting?
I think we have to continue to have the dialogues directly with young people so that they understand if you don't like what you see, vote. If you don't like what you're seeing coming out of government, vote. Because the individuals that are in office are going to be directly responsive to voters. And currently, young people don't make up a significant slice of the voting bloc. When I was on the campaign trail, people would tell me things like, if you see young people, just walk the other way and go find someone that's older to talk to, because that's someone that's actually going to be able to vote and get you in office. And I think young people can change that paradigm by simply going to vote and making their voices heard.
Mayor Young, this was a great conversation. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you.
Here in Memphis, 3 referendums are on the ballot, allowing voters to decide whether to amend the City of Memphis charter to restrict gun carry within the city, despite Tennessee state law allowing carryless permits. Question number 1 requires a person to have a handgun permit in order to legally possess a handgun, as well as it mandates the weapon be locked away while traveling in a motor vehicle. Seems like the amendment has been passed. Question number 2 asks Memphians to consider a ban on owning and distributing assault rifles. It seems that the amendment has been passed. And finally, question number 3. would allow an extreme risk protection order that would cause persons to temporarily be prohibited from possessing a firearm, and it seems that that amendment has been passed. It is important to note that the state has threatened to withhold funding from Memphis, saying the city has no right to circumvent a state law. Now turning back to the presidential race, we're watching a few key battleground states, and I've got some more numbers for you. Starting with Florida, the Sunshine State. News source CNN is reporting with Trump as the projected winner, with 90% of the overall votes counted. Harris has 43% of the votes, and Trump has 56% of the votes. There was once upon a time when Florida was purple, and you remember in 2000, and now ever since then, the state has been majority red. Going to Virginia, news source CNN is reporting with no projected winner with 68% of the votes. Harris has 49, Trump has 49% of the votes. The state was reliably red from 2004, but since 2008, the state has been a blue state. Moving on to Arizona, news source CNN is reporting with 49% of the total votes counted, Harris has 50% of the votes, Trump has 49% of the votes. We're going to move to New Jersey. News source CNN is reporting with 72% of the total votes counted, Harris has 52% of the votes, and Trump has 46% of the votes. We're going to go to the cowboy state, Wyoming. News source Politico is reporting that Trump is the projected winner with 8% of the total votes counted. Harris has 33% of the votes, and Trump has 66% of the votes. Things are really starting to heat up right now. But let's turn our focus back to the Senate. Kendall?
Thanks, Calvin. Candidates have contested every vote, as the results could potentially alter the balance of the power in the White House. In Arizona, news source CNN reports with 35% of the votes counted, with Democrat Gallego 53% of the vote and Republican Lake with 45%. The Arizona seat is open, creating a competitive landscape for both parties. Now in Wisconsin, news source CNN reports with 32% of the votes counted, with Democrat incumbent Tammy Baldwin ahead with 51% of the votes, and Republican Eric Hove with 47%. Now in Ohio, news source CNN reports with 72% of the votes counted and no projected winner at this time. Republican Marino has 51% of the votes counted, and Democrat incumbent Brown has 46%. Now in Nebraska, news source ABC reports with 40% of the votes in, with Republican incumbent Pete Ricketts ahead with 53% of the vote, and Democrat Love Jr. with 47%. Now lastly, in Minnesota, news source ABC reports with 2% of the votes in, with Democrat incumbent Amy Klobuchar with 48% of the votes and Republican White with 49%. I'll keep you updated with more results. Calvin, back to you.
Thank you, Kendall. Now turning back to the U.S. House of Representatives, Tyler Curry has to give us insight on the races. Tyler?
Thanks, Calvin. As the night goes on, voters have turned out in significant numbers. And here are the latest results. Looking at Pennsylvania's 8th district, CNN is reporting that with 66% of the votes counted, current Democratic incumbent Matt Cartwright holds 53% of the votes, while his Republican opponent Brent Shannon Jr. holds 47% of the votes. Moving over to Colorado's 8th district, ABC News is reporting that with 66% of the votes counted, current Democratic incumbent Yadira Caraveo holds 50% of the votes in a tight race against her Republican opponent, Gabe Evans, who holds 48% of the votes. Now, Caraveo's selling point is her bipartisan work. It says here that she's helped pass a bipartisan tax cut, a bipartisan bill into law to fight fentanyl epidemic, and broke with her party leadership to support tougher penalties for fentanyl offenses. And Evans is a member of the Colorado House of Representatives representing District 48. Colorado's public radio describes the 8th district as Colorado's most politically competitive seat. Moving over to Arizona's 1st district, CNN reports that with 63% of the votes counted, Democrat Ahmed Shah is taking the lead with 51% of the votes against current Republican incumbent David Sherwood, who holds 49% of the votes. Looking at Minnesota's 2nd District, USA Today reports that with 4% of the votes counted, current Democratic incumbent Ann Craig holds 58% of the votes against Republican Joe Tarab, who holds 39% of the votes. Looking at Alabama's 2nd District, USA Today reports that with 18% of the votes counted, Shamari Figures is falling behind with 44% of the votes, with her Republican opponent, Caroline Dobson, holding 56% of the votes. Looking at Texas 15, CNN reports that with 14% of the votes counted, current Republican incumbent Monica De La Cruz holds 73% of the votes against her Democratic opponent, Michelle Vallejo, who holds only 27% of the votes. The hot races are really picking up pace, Calvin. I'll be back in a couple of minutes with more vital key statistics.
Thank you for the update, Tyler. We're going to take a short break, but GHS TV's live coverage of Election Night 2024 will be right back.
The reason I chose art is because I love many aspects of art, such as the fact of being able to draw what you like or draw from your imagination.
Art does open the horizon of the mind. You have to have a certain type of mindset and mind to be an artist.
I think the arts are really important because they provide students with that safe space. They provide them a space where they can express themselves, they can be who they really want to be.
I've always been interested in art, even though I haven't always been good at it. And I think it's like my primary form of self-expression. I feel safest in an art classroom. I like the community, and I like to experiment with other mediums.
At Germantown High School, we offer a variety of art classes. We have our introductory art classes, Art 1, Art 1 Honors. We also have the AP Art and the International Baccalaureate Art program as well.
When it comes to students who feel like they cannot draw or do any kind of visual art, that's my territory. They often come in saying, Mr. Weddle, I can't do this. And I say, relax, you're in the right area.
I want them to learn new techniques, try new media, develop skills that they're proud of in the arts.
I think the idea of being able to present something, an idea, their own work, a concept, those are exercises that we do in our class every day.
It's really fun because you get to really do things at your own speed and you get to really experiment with a lot of things.
It's a very eye-opener for me. It helped me determine what I wanted to do in life. It helped me a lot, what I wanted to major in, how I wanted to do it, what plan I wanted to follow.
Don't give up. Always keep persevering, always keep trying, and keep doing, because you'll always learn something new and you'll find something else that you want to do. And when you find something you want to do and you love to do it, continue doing it and continue finding new things to love about it.
For more information about the Kappa program, visit ghskappa.com or call 755-7775.
You're watching the award-winning GHS TV, a nationally recognized student television station.
Welcome back to the final half hour of GHS TV's live coverage of Election Night 2024. I'm your moderator, Calvin Nicholson. New updates are still coming in as we enter the final stretch. After a long, drawn-out, and controversial hiring process, MSCS finally named a superintendent earlier this year, and her name is Dr. Marie Fagins. I spoke one-on-one with Superintendent Fagins about her ambitious plans for Memphis Shelby County Schools. Dr. Fagins, welcome on the show. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Fagins, being a superintendent is a huge job and responsibility. What prompts you to leave Detroit and pursue this position in Memphis? And now that you're here, what is your vision for the district?
Yeah, so
You know, when we think about our trajectory in life in general, for me, it's always been about leadership. Where can I go and be most impactful? Where can I go and have a great use of all the experiences and access and exposure that I've been a beneficiary of throughout my life? And so for me, Memphis was that space. It's my opportunity to put together all the experiences I've had in different cities and spaces in the career of education, but also in more expansive ways as well. And so as superintendent, it is a big job, right? 115,000 students and growing are depending on us to get it right and to get it right now. And so the vision for Memphis Shelby County Schools is it's a big one. It's quite ambitious, but I want every kid, every student, just like you, to be able to win and win big. And so your opportunity for wild success depends on the types of programs that you have in your schools, depends on the types of relationships that you are available or able to create based on the programs that are offered. It's also based on our investments, budget-wise. And so the vision is to become an exemplar and a model for the state, but also for the nation.
We've literally seen you sitting in students' desks to get a new perspective of how it feels to be a student. You told a group of students, and I quote, "I really want to see and feel, more importantly, the experience. What is the experience like for you all?" End quote. Not a lot of principals, let alone superintendents, would come out of their office to sit in and fill the shoes of a student. Why is this so important to you?
Yeah, I remember what it was like for me as a student, but you learn differently. You're having a different experience than I am. What better way than to literally and physically get into the seat of a student? I think I saw a picture where I was sharing a seat with a student. I want to, and will continue to do the same, get the clearest understanding of what's happening in our classrooms. I'm able to see some gaps. I'm able to hear directly from students themselves who are able to express what's happening, what they'd like to see more of, less of. You all are very honest, and you've been clear that class is not engaging. In your words, it's boring, right? And so how do we do a better job collectively to make the educational experience for all of our students better? For me, it's also about hearing directly from teachers. And so if I can see the instruction or lack thereof taking place, I can immediately have conversations with the team about how we get into the gap, and we're not waiting weeks and months to make real-time decisions that impact you every day. When you ask people for their experience, for their feedback, they willingly give it. They immediately feel seen, heard, and valued, and that's how we do this work together. And so I'll continue sitting in seats, I'll continue getting on the carpets, and I'll continue asking the questions. Some of the lessons I've caught, some of them I've been pretty confused, and so I know if I am confused at this stage, you may be as well. And so the clearer understanding that I have, it sharpens my decisions, and it's very tough to make decisions from a great distance. And so the only way I was okay with leaving the classroom as a teacher is if I made the commitment to expanding my classroom. And so it has never been my desire to leave the room and to leave the role as a teacher. So I'm a teacher first, foremost, and forever, and teachers care about their kids.
We can't let you go without mentioning the school board elections, which took place back in August.
Yeah.
What are you doing to, get familiar with these new board members, as it is a lot of them? What are you doing to get acquainted with them?
Yeah, you know what, Calvin? I guarantee you, no matter where you go, you will never have 9 bosses, right? You will never have 9 of them simultaneously. And so it is certainly always going to be a work in progress as we think about, just individuals being individuals, 9 individuals getting to know them personally, professionally, working to serve as an advisor, which is what the superintendent does for a group of board members, but also working to be a good partner, a good collaborative partner, keeping the right energy, remaining informed so that I can ensure that they are informed. We have smart board members, and I always want them to be able to be smart. That means making smart decisions with an understanding that they impact 115,000 lives and growing every day. The decisions that we make, more importantly, the ones that we don't make. And so it is a consistent effort. It requires intentionality. I meet with them weekly, individually, to have conversations during the duration of time that they desire, because it takes what it takes. Happy board members equals a happy organization, and so that is my only goal, and I believe we're doing quite well.
Dr. Fagins, I want to mention it was a pleasure, and I mean pleasure, speaking with you and meeting you today. Thank you for sharing your insight with us today.
Thank you for your energy. You were outstanding.
With issues like immigration, healthcare, and the economy at the forefront, voters are making their voice heard. And here are the latest results. Starting with the Peach State, Georgia. News source Politico is reporting with no projected winner and 88% of the votes counted, Harris has 48% of the votes, while Trump has 51% of the votes. President Joe Biden surprisingly took Georgia in 2020, marking the first time in almost 3 decades that a Democratic presidential candidate has took the state. Moving on to Pennsylvania, the Keystone State. News source CNN is reporting that with 54% of the total votes counted, Harris has 48% of the votes, while Trump has 51% of the votes. While most polls show Trump and Harris tied in the state, it has been an fluctuated of both parties, saying that it's still anyone's race. Moving on to Texas. News source CNN is reporting that Trump is the projected winner, with 73% of the total votes counted. Harris has 43% of the votes, and Trump has 56% of the votes. Every election cycle, the Democrats believe it's their time to flip the great state of Texas. But it seems like due to the more rural areas, it always comes back to be a Republican state. Going to Michigan, news source CNN is reporting with 21% of the total votes counted, Harris has 50% of the votes, and Trump has 48% of the votes. We're going to North Carolina. News source CNN is reporting with 83% of the total votes counted, Harris has 48% of the votes, and Trump has 51% of the votes. Last but surely not least, Wisconsin. News source CNN is reporting that with 48% of the total votes counted, Harris has 49% of the votes, and Trump has 50% of the votes. It's truly tied in Wisconsin, just remembering that we said that they are most unpredictable in the nation. The election is getting very close, but there are still more updates. Kendall, back to you.
Thanks, Calvin. Very close indeed. With news source in CNN reporting with 2% of the votes counted, Democrat incumbent Jon Tester has 39% of the votes, and Republican Sheehy has 60%. Now in Michigan, news source CNN reports with 20% of the votes counted, with Democrat Fagins with 51% of the votes, and Republican Rogers with 46%. Fagins emphasizes her rural roots, aiming to connect with votes beyond suburban areas. Now in New Mexico, news source CNN reports with 36% of the votes counted, with Democrat incumbent Marin Heinrich with 51% of the vote and Republican Domenici with 49%. Now in Wyoming, news source CNN reports with 9% of the votes counted. With no projected winner at this time, Democrat Scott Moreau has 19% of the votes, and Republican Barrasso has 80%. And finally, in Rhode Island, news source CNN reports with 82% of the votes in, with projected winner Sheldon Whitehorse with 58% of the votes, and Republican Morgan with 42%. That's all I have for you right now. I'll be back with more results in a few minutes. Calvin?
Now House anchor Tyler Curry is back to brief us on the races.
Thanks, Calvin. Now let's dive deeper into how close the rest of the House races really are. Starting with New York's 19th district, Politico is reporting that with 58% of the votes counted, current Republican incumbent Marcus Molinaro is falling behind with 43% of the votes, while his Democratic opponent Josh Riley is taking the lead with 57% of the votes. Looking at New York's 4th district, Politico reports that with 53% of the votes counted, current Republican incumbent Anthony Despacito is falling behind with 47% of the votes, while his Democratic opponent Laura Gillen is taking the lead with 53% of the votes. Now, this race is a rematch of 2022, when Despacito defeated Gillen by just 4 points. The argument can be made that because of the political climate of this district, New York's 4th district is the best Democratic target in the country. Moving over to the 34th district in Texas, Politico reports that with 48% of the votes counted, current Democratic incumbent Vincent Gonzalez Jr. and his Republican opponent Mayra Flores are both tied with 50% of the votes each. Now, Gonzalez says that he's running to be the fighter and strong voice that the South Texans need in Congress, saying his priorities are education, jobs, healthcare, and veterans. whereas Flores says her priorities are border security, bringing jobs to South Texas, and expanding parental control in education. Now, let's check back in with some of the races we looked at earlier tonight. Moving over to Michigan's 8th district, Politico reports that with 5% of the votes counted, Kristen McDonald-Rivet is falling behind with a very close cut, holding 46% of the votes, while her Republican opponent, Paul Judge, is taking the lead with 49% of the votes. Looking at Arizona's 6th district, Politico reports that with 46% of the votes counted, Democrat Engel is taking the lead with 54% of the votes counted, with her Republican opponent, Juan Ciscomani, falling behind with 44% of the votes. And lastly, looking at Pennsylvania's 7th district, Politico reports that with 71% of the votes counted, Democratic incumbent Susan Wild is taking the lead with 53% of the votes counted, whereas her Republican opponent, Ryan McKenzie, is falling behind with 48% of the votes counted. This election is getting very close, and I'll be back with more results. Calvin, back to you.
In 1982, Germantown High School Television launched a decades-long tradition, live election night coverage. Although candidates have come and gone over the years, the dedication to news excellence has remained. Here's an exclusive look behind the scenes in production of GHS TV's election night coverage.
Roll tree, switch audio. Stand by white sound.
The election night is one of the biggest shows that we are producing here at GHS TV.
Is a student-ran crew. It is 100% done by students.
We've been working on election night for about 6 to 5 months. So the preparation is very long, but ultimately it'll result in an amazing show.
Let's get to some of these results.
The process of election night is very rigorous, in which you have to count up the percentage of the votes and you have to take on the results of those polls.
It's a big crew, so for each anchor there's 2 people to that anchor. You have the researcher, which is a government student, and then you have the data inputter, which is a Film 2 student, and then you have the anchor, which is a production student, and that's just the front end of what you see.
Thank you, Calvin, and good evening, everyone. I prepared by looking through my races and hits and making sure they're all in order, updating myself with previous data from previous election nights to make sure I am in tone with what's going on in the states and the candidates.
It is very important to be precise with the results because it impacts the truth that we bring onto the show, and we need to have the integrity to keep going on forward in order to make this election night as best as we can.
It's an election unlike any other in American history.
I am proud of being a producer of election night with me and my staff who work very diligently, and we try to be as thorough as we can with the process because election night can be a challenge.
None of us came in knowing really what to do. Of course, we've been directors, we've been graphics, but doing a live 2-hour show constantly, of course the tensions are high, but this is a professional setting. We treat this as a real studio, which it is.
The responsibilities are pretty high, but as director, you have to take up that mantle and be the leader for the whole crew.
Everybody on the team, I believe, go to the acronym FAT. They're faithful, they're accessible, and they're teachable.
You are telling them what to do, not they.
From the summer to now, students have grown tremendously. Not just maturity-wise, but academically, they understand it a lot more now.
It helps me very much in the long run. I want to pursue a career in this, and being the director of election night really will give me a grasp of how stressful these kind of things are, but how proud I can be of these kind of things.
Election night has benefited me because it was really the striving factor to pushing me to actually learn more about politics. In about a couple months, I'm going to be 18, so it is important to know who to vote for and what your vote can stand for.
As we close out this election night, the race remains thoroughly too close to call between former President Trump and Vice President Harris. Both candidates have energized their bases, showcasing the deep divide yet undeniable engagement with our electoral rate. With votes still being counted, the anticipation in the air is palpable, reflecting the stakes of the pivotal moment in our democracy. Regardless of the outcome tonight, they underscore the importance and participation and power of every single vote. we witnessed remarkable turnouts, a clear testament to the passion that drives American voters. As we await the final results, let's remain hopeful, engaged, and ready to support the direction our nation will take next. Now we're going to shift our coverage back to the Senate. Kendall?
After weeks of uncertainty over whether the Republicans would flip the chamber or the Democrats would keep the Senate, we now have an answer. It appears Republicans will take control after projecting the winning over the pivotal races in West Virginia and Montana. This was the outcome most people expected. Democrats have to defend 23 seats, many in states not as favorable to Dems as before, while Republicans had a much easier map to defend with only 11 seats up this election cycle.
Thanks, Kendall. We're now going to shift our attention to the House of Representatives. Tyler?
Hey, Calvin. As our election night is coming to a close, it seems the Republicans will be able to keep the majority this year. Even though the races were very competitive, especially in Texas 34 and Colorado 8, they were able to pull through and effectively keep control of the House for the next 2 years. Back to you, Calvin.
Thanks, Tyler. Tonight's election reminds us all that the democracy can and is thriving, despite the fractures upon our fellow Americans. I want to take a second to thank the guests who were interviewed and our production crew for making this production possible. I hope you've enjoyed our show. Be sure to join us November 2026, where GHS TV takes you through another exciting night of election night coverage. And please don't wait 2 years to tune in again. GHS TV has many wonderful local shows, just like this one, all season long, on ghstv.org. We're streaming live 24 hours a day. On behalf of all tonight's anchors and the entire crew, thank you for watching Germantown High School's live coverage of Election Night 2024, and have a great evening.